The Trump administration. The Trump administration has launched Operation Midway Blitz through ICE and intended as a crackdown on what they call criminal illegal aliens in Chicago and the surrounding regions. I don't know if you know this, but we are the surrounding regions of Chicago. Hundreds of federal agents from multiple agencies, including ICE, U.S. Marshals, the DEA, and the ATF have been involved in these raids. The Trump administration is also employing National Guard troops, 200 plus from the state of Texas, plus from other states to the Chicago area. I don't know if you guys know this, but we're the Chicago area. They're being brought here to supposedly protect federal agents and facilities. Now, this has been reported in The Guardian and The Washington Post. So, if they got it wrong, sue them, not me. There was actually a major raid in Chicago this week where 300 ICE agents stormed a building. They actually stormed a building. Allegedly, 30 supposed criminal illegal aliens were arrested, including members of Trim de Agua, which has been designated by the Trump administration as a terrorist organization. Now, Trim de Agua is a gang from Venezuela. They're just your standard gang. They're not a terrorist organization. But the Trump administration has rendered them a terrorist organization so he can have an excuse to probably invade Venezuela in a few weeks as a sponsor of terrorism. We just talked about this a few weeks ago. I think it was 2 weeks ago. Right. So Trim de Agua is just a street gang that the right, the Republicans, have started calling a terrorist organization to give them an excuse to try to overthrow Venezuela's government. And I don't see if you guys noticed this. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but just yesterday, the opposition, one of the opposition leaders in Venezuela, was given the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, this woman is one of the opposition leaders who's trying to help the United States of America overthrow Venezuela's government, just like we did in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, Somalia, just like we tried to do in Ukraine. Well, we actually did overthrow Ukraine's government in the Maidan coup of 2014 and replaced them with a U.S. puppet. And so this is sort of par for the course. Once again, all these things are sort of intertwined for our government, where our ambitions to control the entire Western Hemisphere with the Monroe Doctrine, our ambitions to expand the surveillance state, and our ambitions to basically control the world, all sort of interconnect. And now, the idea of criminal illegal aliens is what is being trumpeted as, no pun intended, it's being trumpeted as the reason for this brutal civil crackdown, which looks exactly like something out of a fascist movie or novel, something like 1984 or Brave New World or something. They used helicopters and chemical agents in this raid in the middle of Chicago. Chemical agents. There were children, naked children, being brought out of these apartment complexes. And I used to always say, when I was critical of the American foreign policy, I would always say, bombing Iraq or Afghanistan or Gaza, for that matter, to stop terrorism would be like bombing Chicago to stop gangbanging. And I always was trying to sort of illustrate how, just bombing Chicago would not stop the gangster disciples and the vice lords and the four corner hustlers, and you'd also end up killing and catching a lot of civilians in the collateral damage. In my mind, I was thinking, even as low as my opinion of this government is, I never thought that I'd actually see our government basically declaring war on Chicago under the guise of stopping crime. I thought that when I would make that analogy, that would show how fruitless that bombing all these countries is under the guise of stopping terrorism is. Instead, now we're going to see the same tactics that are used in our endless wars that never end but seem to make Lockheed Martin and Raytheon and Boeing billions and billions of dollars being brought back here to the homeland. And so again, all these things end up being interconnected. Now, a big part of the problem with what's going on with this situation is that this isn't just a Trump-made situation. This is also the fault of a lot of our leaders, including some here in the city of Gary and East Chicago and all these region areas on the lake here that call themselves sanctuary cities. Sanctuary cities who have been harboring criminal illegal immigrants for years with no plan of what to do with them. In Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, now Brandon Johnson, who I fully regret ever supporting. I forget which one of you guys called here and was, back when the Rev was still here, and was telling me about how awful Lori Lightfoot and how awful Brandon Johnson was going to be. And I was saying, well, just give him a chance. Let's give him a chance, Good Lord. I had no idea that Brandon Johnson would be as incompetent as he is. He has a 6.6% approval rating in Chicago. 6%. He is going to go down in history as the worst mayor, probably in Chicago's history. And a big part of the reason is because he, like other Chicago leaders, deemed Chicago a sanctuary city without any plans on how to pay for all these illegals that were going to be brought into the city of Chicago. And since we're right across the border from them, we're right across the border from Chicago, whatever's in Chicago is in Indiana, and vice versa. Whatever's in Indiana is in Chicago. I remember during COVID, when COVID first started in early 2020, when I first started seeing that there was COVID cases in Chicago, I went, oh crap. Well, it's here, because anything in Chicago is here. So if there's a bunch of illegal aliens in Chicago, you better believe they're here, because we're a sanctuary city just like Chicago is. And we're right on their border. And anybody who can't afford to live in Chicago, guess where they come? Right here. Right here. Northwest Indiana, East Chicago, which, again, has to be attractive because it's a majority Hispanic city. I knew illegal immigrants back when I lived in East Chicago in the early 90s. In the late 80s, early 90s, when I was a little kid, a child. Right next door, one of the places we lived next door, they used to have illegal immigrants there all the time. And this was in the 80s and 90s. I can only imagine now that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris just sort of opened the border, basically opened the borders, and were literally flying people in to the country so that they wouldn't be coming across the border. I can only imagine how many illegals we have in this region now. So they make all these promises about taking care of these people without any plan to take care of it. And now the city of Chicago is $1 billion in the hole. $1 billion with a B. Hold on, caller. I got to get through this. Just stay on the line. $1 billion in the hole because they had no way to deal with this. Now, strangely enough, this guy that I'm about to play this clip from, I believe should have been, he's the guy Chicago should have elected. He's a young man named Jamal Green. He might be the next mayor of Chicago, and if they are smart, they will vote for somebody, at least somebody like him. Maybe he can be an advisor to the city of Chicago. I know he's a very young man. If you know, his age might turn a lot of people off, but I always tell people, look at how young the founding fathers were. Look at how young people like Richard Hatcher were when they got elected. Like, at a certain point, just going with the same old people over and over and over again has gotten us to this place that we're in today. You might need some new blood. And Jamal Green, I don't know exactly how to pronounce it, but this young brother, I've been following him for a long time. He's from Chicago. He ran in a race last time against Brandon Johnson and Lori Lightfoot and all them, and Tony Preckwinkle. He has a lot more grasp of what's going on, and this is how he sees what has been done to the people of Chicago by their own government and by this United States government.
See, I'm pissed off because a lot of people out there are acting like they don't understand what is actually happening in the city of Chicago in regards to the ICE raids. Let me tell you something. Black people, again, are collateral damage in this. And all the black people that are getting mad at ICE and Donald Trump, hold on, you got to get mad at the politicians right here locally, because it was the politicians right here in your city that decided to dump the migrant issue on the black community like they do every single time. When they came across the border and checked asylum, they were able to come over into our city and get incentives like medical care, 6 months free rent, free transportation, free child care. We fed them each and every day. And those people that they were giving assistance to, they didn't go up to the north side and to the white community. All of the people out there protesting that are white, they didn't open up their doors for them, and they didn't want none of the shelters on their neighborhood. Guess where they opened up the shelters? In the black community. Those same school buildings that they shut down in 2013 that were educating black kids, they took those school buildings and they made them migrant shelters. And then they gave over $700 million to a company out in Florida to manage those shelters. They took the buildings that you've been asking for to be developed and build new housing, and they made them into migrant homes, giving them 6 months of free rent. They dumped the problem on black community like they do every single time. When it was George Floyd riots, they closed downtown and pushed people to loot into the neighborhoods because they knew that people didn't care. Where was all the people right now? They weren't in our neighborhoods helping us open up back up our businesses. They were not in our neighborhoods helping us clean up. They weren't in our neighborhoods when we were fighting for Laquan McDonald, who was shot 16 times by Jason Van Dyke. I didn't see them at the protest. But now, right now, they want to make black people a part of the fight. When they made us collateral damage in the first place, we are always losing. That's why ICE is raiding buildings where black people are, is because they put them there. They pay for their rent. They pay for their food. They pay for their child care. They pay for everything, but they didn't put them where they live. They put them where black people live because they don't want to invest into the community. So that's the easiest place to dump a problem. So yes, we can say ICE is being aggressive. Yes, we know that our armed forces are always aggressive more to us. But what we can say is that our politicians did it to us. They should have never allowed them to come over here in droves like they did. And then when they did come over here, they should have never put them and dumped them in black communities, acting like we didn't want economic development, like we didn't deserve better schools and deserve community centers and deserve grocery stores. We deserve better. And our politicians need to act like it. Stop putting everything before us.
Woo, boy. Jamal Green, man. Woo. setting people on fire. Good Lord. He let them have it, and rightfully so. I don't know anybody could have put it better. If folks in Chicago are smart, like I said, this is a smart brother. He's been politically involved for a while. Ran for mayor a few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. It might be his time. If the people of Chicago are smart, maybe he should be the next mayor of Chicago instead of a corporate liberal or a useless buffoon like Brandon Johnson has been. So this, what he covered in that video, is something that the media doesn't like to talk about. They put them in black communities. They put them on the south side and the west side of Chicago. So when you see ICE in black communities harassing black people, it's because white liberals and the colored people who love them put all these illegal immigrants in black communities to once again use us as collateral damage. This is what I talk about on a weekly basis on this show. This is why I stopped being a Democrat years ago. This is why I stopped being a liberal years ago. I am sick and tired of us being the bottom boop of the Democratic Party and being willing to take all their abuse. We don't live any better in cities controlled by them than we live in cities controlled by Republicans or states controlled by Republicans. And this is a big part of the reason why. Black people are being run out of California in droves. You would think California is a Democrat state. Black people should be in heaven in California. No, black people in hell in California. That's why they're leaving. Going back to Texas. Moving to Atlanta. You got black people moving to red states from California. You got black people leaving blue cities like Chicago to move to Texas and Atlanta and Nashville and all these places. And Florida. How does that happen? They told us if we vote for them that they will look out for us. And they don't. They just see us as their bottom. Beep. And so now, once again, we as black people get hit with the double whammy. We get hit with the double whammy. The liberals throw us to the wolves and fill our communities with illegal immigrants who have no regard for us or our society, or our culture. Then conservatives come in with the fascistic, draconian tactics to crack down on illegal immigration, but you know they're going to use them against us as well because they've always used everything against us, going back 400 years. Helicopters, chemical agents, zip tying babies. That's absolutely disgusting. They stormed an apartment complex while families were asleep. Deployed chemical agents near a public school. They handcuffed a city council member of Chicago at the hospital. A city council member from Chicago was at a hospital and they handcuffed them. So once again, you know, you can't get much smarter than Malcolm X. He told us 60 years ago that black people were just basically used in this intramural scrimmage between white liberals and white conservatives. But so many of us still want to cape. We still want to cape. You get your Candace Owens and your Jason Whitlocks and your other Black Coon Factory who vote for who cape for the Republicans, and then you get your average black person who capes for the Democrats. They both use us and abuse us. Let me get this caller before I have to go to a break. Hello, caller. What's up?
Hi. I just wanted to let you know, Gary is a welcoming city. They're not sanctuary.
Okay.
Chicago Sanctuary, Gary is a welcoming city.
Okay. All right. Thanks for your call. Thanks for your call. I wish I would have asked what's the difference. What's the difference? Let me type right here. What's the difference between a sanctuary city and a welcoming city? Okay, let's see what the old computer gives us. The difference between a welcoming city, sanctuary cities, and welcoming cities both aim to support migrants, but sanctuary cities specifically limit local law enforcement's cooperation with, while welcoming cities focus on creative, inclusive policies across. Essentially, all sanctuary cities can be considered it's the same nonsense. You're bringing in people to do three things. Mass immigration has three purposes: cause chaos in the working class, to prevent class consciousness in the working class. Basically, you're throwing in millions of people or hundreds of thousands of people who have virtually nothing in common culturally with the working class. So of course people are going to just naturally be suspicious of random people showing up in their community, which is going to cause a certain amount of upheaval and distrust, drive down wages. So there's going to be chaos, there's going to be lower wages for the native population, and to dilute the economic, political, and cultural power of working class people. That's the whole point. You're just diluting the working class, basically. You're diluting the cultural, economic, and political power of the working class. You take a city like Gary, if you welcome too many random people here, then Gary ain't Gary no more. Now, I'm not saying that we should keep people out who have businesses, who are going to bring business here, who are going to start businesses, who are going to hire Gary citizens, who are going to build and develop here. Great. Okay, we should welcome those people, whether they come from Chicago, France, Germany. If you're going to come to a Gary and you're going to start a business and you're going to hire Gary citizens and, give us all a living wage that we can all take care of families and pay taxes and put into the tax base, great. But when you bring low wage, low skilled workers from random countries, you're just going to cause chaos, drive down wages, and dilute the economic, political, and cultural influence of the native population. If you filled Gary, Indiana tomorrow with a bunch of random, let's just say, people from China, Gary is no longer a chocolate city. It is no longer the city of the 1972 National Black Political Assembly. It is no longer Richard Gordon Hatcher's city. It's no longer the hometown of Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5. It would be something totally different at that point. So that's what I'm talking about, diluting the cultural influence. So yeah, basically all the sanctuary cities are welcoming, but not all welcoming cities are sanctuary. Like they're basically, like I said, they're basically related. And so the response from the city of Chicago's government has been completely trash, because the city government of Chicago is trash. The Illinois state government and Chicago have filed lawsuits to block the deployment of these troops and ICE agents, calling it unconstitutional and an overreach of federal authority. Brandon Johnson is actually declaring that some parts of the city will be off limits. I don't know how he's going to do that. I have zero idea how he's going to do that. For his part, the Trump administration has vowed to deploy troops to Chicago, and he's actually saying that Brandon Johnson and J.B. Pritzker should be in prison.
President Donald Trump says the Illinois governor and Chicago mayor should be jailed as they oppose his deployment of National Guard troops for his immigration and crime crackdown. Trump wrote on Truth Social that Mayor Brandon Johnson and Governor J.B. Pritzker should be in jail for failing to protect ICE officers. He's often singled out Chicago and Illinois because they have some of the country's strongest immigrant protections. He's also said that the nation's third largest city is a hellhole of crime, even though police statistics show significant drops in most crimes, including homicides. National Guard troops from Texas are positioned outside Chicago, despite a lawsuit by the state and city to block the deployment. The state's governor, one of Trump's fiercest critics, has called the president a wannabe dictator.
Let me be clear. Donald Trump is using our service members as political props and as pawns in his illegal effort to militarize our nation's cities.
Chicago will not be used as a political prop. Chicago will not be intimidated, and we will not be silent.
In posts on X, Mayor Johnson said, "I'm not going anywhere," and Governor Pritzker said, "I will not back down," in response to Trump's comment.
I mean, to be fair, all the sanctuary city nonsense was virtue signaling on the part of liberals in the first place. Look at us. We're not like the Republicans who are horrible and racist. We support bringing in random people from all over the world. But if you go back to the roots of the left in this country, back to Cesar Chavez, back to A. Philip Randolph, even through liberals like, who I don't consider left, but still a lot of people do, like Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, they were all immigration restrictionists. You know, A. Philip Randolph, the greatest black labor leader this country's ever had, was talking about how we had too many immigrants to the point we had immigrant indigestion in 1935, almost a century ago. Cesar Chavez used to go down to the border to physically throw illegal immigrants back across the border. Him and his cousin Manuel used to go to the border and throw illegal immigrants back across the border. It used to be Republicans who wanted to bring as many cheap laborers in the country as possible. That's why Bernie Sanders always talked about the Koch brothers' proposal of open borders, because the Koch brothers were behind the Open Borders Project. That was them. Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, both voted for a border fence to keep illegal immigrants out back when they were in Congress. Now we have to pretend none of that happened. And we have to let all these people come in and stay in our communities. And that's why you get people like Jamal Green who are so ticked off by what the city government in Chicago is doing. And a lot of black people in a lot of these places, I mean, these are just random citizens at Chicago, City Council meeting.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
You spent over $574 million on illegal immigrants here in Chicago, Illinois since 2022. Now, you still feel like you have to harbor these illegals, which is not a good idea. And in my personal opinion, I don't think it's a good idea to challenge Tom Homan on this, because he's trying to clean up our cities, Mr. Brandon Johnson. Now, let me just remind everybody here that Brandon Johnson is terrible with the budget. How is this $40 million credit line is going to work exactly? Because the key word is credit. So how much will we be using from this $40 million? And the real question is, how much will we be paying back? Now, you want to sit here, you and J.B. Pritzker want to puff out your chest and fight Tom Homan. We need Tom Homan here in Chicago. We need Donald Trump. And I don't want to see people like Pam Bundy and Cash Patel, you know, haul you up out of here and become prosecuted. I don't want to see that happen. But they will do their job if they have to, Brandon Johnson. Now, we are $1 billion in debt. That's absolutely insane. Kamala Harris, she spent $1 billion on her campaign less than a year, and she's $20 million in debt. So it's looking like Democrats are bad with money. Now, you ignored me for 10 to 15 seconds last time I was speaking, and I really did not appreciate that at all. But I got a Christmas present for you. Let's remind the people of Chicago that Brandon Johnson spent $32,000 in campaign funds on haircuts and makeup. So I got an early Christmas present for you, Brandon Johnson. This is some makeup for you right here. You got some rouge, you got the makeup brush right there, so you can save this people some money, for crying out loud. Now, let me tell you people, I'm going to be serious here. We need to start voting different in these cities like New York and Chicago. Stop voting these people in. It's not Democrat versus Republican anymore. It is populist versus establishment. It is the populist versus the establishment. Stop letting them trick you into the race baiting when it comes to Brandon Johnson. Oh, black people need help too. Trump want to hurt black people. What are you talking about? We're legal here. We are legal.
Whew, man, that's a brother from Chicago who this was from a few years ago. So this has been going on for a while. The people of Chicago, a lot of black people, are extremely ticked off by what's happening with Brandon Johnson's administration. The really unfortunate thing is that, you have somebody like Donald Trump, who himself is so incompetent and buffoonish and just petty, because a lot of this is about revenge. For him, Chicago, he wants revenge on all these blue cities that did not support him. And Chicago actually held the DNC last year. The DNC, the Democratic National Convention. So a lot of this is about him getting back at Chicago for that. And, Trump has let his pure fascist instincts start to really come out. And so this is actually the worst thing that could happen. If you are an immigration restrictionist, as I am, like I said, historically, most people on the left were, before, liberals, destroyed the left in this country. This is the worst thing that can happen, because what you get now from somebody like Donald Trump is he does things in the absolute worst way possible. And so that means that there's going to be a backlash to this backlash. And so the next time the Democrats are in office, they're going to be even more pro-illegal immigrant. They're going to be even more wanting to, completely change the complexion of all of our cities. Who knows what cities like Gary will look like 20, 30 years from now? There may not be any black people in it, very few. Compton and Watts in LA used to be black. South Central Los Angeles, all these places were black, historically black communities. Did y'all know Compton is 70% Hispanic now? Yes, the home of Serena Williams, Venus Williams, NWA, Dr. Dre, Eazy, Kendrick Lamar. 70% Hispanic now. Much of black LA has been run out of LA. There are very few black people in LA still now. That's a blue state. Black men used to make $17 an hour 40 years ago hanging drywall in places like LA, which back then was more than enough for a living wage. That's the equivalent like $40, $50 an hour today. Today, there's no black men in the industry. And this is just going to continue because the blue states are going to dig their heels in because Donald Trump's a fascist, and he is. There's no doubting that. And they're going to force this even more down our throats, and a lot of you will defend it just because you're anti-Trump. But like the guy said, this ain't about Democrats or Republicans. It ain't about red versus blue. It's populist versus establishment. This is a populist issue versus an establishment issue. The establishment wants as many random people in here to drive down your wages, to dilute your economic, political, and cultural influence, and to sow as much dissension and chaos in your communities as possible so that you don't come together against them. And unfortunately, it looks like they're going to get what they want. They are going to get what they want. I want to address really quickly Portland before I have to go to a break. In Portland, the Trump administration has been attempting a more aggressive federal enforcement and military-style presence, especially around the ICE facility and protests. This is literally one block in Portland. Donald Trump is calling the troops in and everything for one block. He called Portland a cesspool, and Portland's one of the safest big cities in America. And that's why I say this is the bad thing about having somebody as ridiculous and clownish as Donald Trump in office. Because if we had a real president, an FDR, somebody who actually knew what they were doing, he would say, look, mass immigration is not good for working class people. Never has been, never will be. You don't believe me? Look around the world. England, France, Germany. Well, all these places that welcome in thousands of millions of immigrants. They're all in chaos right now, culturally. It always ends this way. And right behind it comes a right-wing fascist. Every time. Even in the most liberal societies in the world, like Sweden and Denmark. Sweden, they had a right-wing party come into power a few years ago that hadn't been in power in 100 years. In Germany, you're seeing right-wing parties that haven't been in power since Hitler come into power. This is what follows mass immigration. And a real leader would say, look, we're not going to have this mass immigration nonsense. But at the same time, we're not going to start trampling people's civil rights and civil liberties either. That's what a real leader would do. Immigrants have a right to due process. Even illegal immigrants have a right to due process. But Trump is here to do what he's doing, which is be a clown. And unfortunately, we're going to pay for it in this country. He just put a 100% tariff on Chinese goods. That's going to start next month in November. Another tariff. And so now, this is right around Christmas. And it's just unfortunate. And like I said, once again, it looks like we as the American people are going to have to, like I said, realize what is important. Come together, regardless of political party or race or any of that other stuff, and say, look, these people who are running our society are not qualified to be there. That might mean a general strike. There's been a lot of talk about a general strike in recent years, and you never know. That might be the only thing that stops what's been happening here in this country and even in our region. Just shut everything down. All right, folks, when we come back, we're going to get into a really sad story, a tragic story. But hopefully, this young man can find some vindication in death. We'll be right back here on WLTH 1370M, straight out of the cannon with me, Scott Cannon.